She thought it was a one-night stand, only to discover the man she slept with was her new boss. The rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Meridian Grand Hotel like bullets against glass. Talia Benson pressed her phone harder against her ear, trying to hear her boss over the chaos erupting in the ballroom behind her. "What do you mean the ice sculptures melted?" she whispered urgently, stepping further into the hotel's marble corridor. "The event starts in 2 hours." Lightning illuminated the Pacific coastline as she ended the call, her hands trembling with exhaustion. 3 days of coordinating the Global Events Summit, and now this. The storm had knocked out power to half the hotel, the celebrity chef was stuck at the airport, and her perfectionist boss was having a meltdown. At 29, Talia had built her reputation on never letting events fail. But tonight, everything was falling apart. She needed air. She needed to escape. The hotel bar beckoned like a sanctuary, dimly lit and nearly empty, except for a few conference stragglers. Talia slumped onto a leather bar stool, her elegant black dress wrinkled from hours of crisis management. "Rough night?" The voice was warm, tinged with genuine concern. She looked up to find a man settling onto the stool beside her, tall, with dark hair and eyes that seemed to catch every flicker of the amber lighting. He was handsome in that effortless way that suggested money, but his smile was kind. "You could say that," Talia sighed, accepting the whiskey neat he'd ordered for her without asking. "I'm supposed to be coordinating the biggest event of my career, and instead I'm watching it implode in real time." "Events have a way of working themselves out," he said, his voice carrying a hint of an accent she couldn't place. "Sometimes the best nights are the ones that don't go according to plan." For the first time in days, Talia laughed. "Easy for you to say. You're not the one who has to explain to 300 executives why their welcome dinner is being served in the dark." "Actually," he grinned, "I think I might be one of those executives, and honestly, this is the most interesting conference I've attended in years." They talked until the storm outside began to calm. He told her about his travels, his love of architecture, his surprisingly deep knowledge of wine. She found herself sharing stories about her childhood in Oakland, her dreams of starting her own firm, her fear that she was working herself into an early grave. He never mentioned his name. She never asked. "I should go," Talia said when she realized it was past midnight. "Early morning tomorrow." "Should," he repeated, standing with her. "But do you want to?" The question hung between them like a challenge. Talia Benson, who had never broken a rule in her professional life, who scheduled everything down to the minute, who wouldn't even jaywalk, found herself shaking her head. "No," she whispered. "I don't want to go." What happened next would change everything. Talia woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar curtains and the sound of waves crashing below. The suite was enormous, clearly penthouse level, with a view that probably cost more per night than she made in a month. The other side of the bed was empty, though the indentation on the pillow told her she hadn't dreamed the night before. A note on hotel stationery lay folded on the nightstand. "Thank you for reminding me what it feels like to be myself. D." She dressed quickly, her heart pounding with a mixture of embarrassment and something else she didn't want to name. In her 3 years of attending industry conferences, she had never, ever done anything like this. Back in her own modest room, Talia tried to push the memory away. It was a one-time thing, a beautiful, perfect mistake that would never happen again. But her body remembered. The way he'd touched her, like she was precious. The way he'd listened to her dreams as if they mattered. The way he'd made her feel alive in a way she'd forgotten was possible. 2 weeks later, her world collapsed for an entirely different reason. "I'm sorry, Talia," her boss Janet said, tears in her eyes as she cleaned out her desk. "The firm is done. We're filing for bankruptcy tomorrow." Stellar Events had been Talia's home for 5 years, her stepping stone to bigger things. Now she was unemployed with rent due and no prospects in sight. But sometimes the universe has a twisted sense of humor. "Carter Global Events wants to interview you," her former colleague Maria called 3 days later. "Like immediately. They're expanding their West Coast operations, and they specifically asked for you." Talia's hands shook as she held the phone. Carter Global was legendary in the industry, Working for them would be like going from community theatre to Broadway overnight. "They want to see me tomorrow," she told her reflection, practicing her interview smile. "This is it. This is my chance." She had no idea how right she was. The Carter Global Events offices occupied 3 floors of a gleaming downtown tower. Everything was glass and steel and quiet efficiency. Talia smoothed her navy blazer as the elevator climbed to the executive floor, her portfolio clutched in sweaty palms. "Mr. Carter will see you now," the receptionist announced, gesturing toward imposing double doors. Talia stepped into the boardroom, her prepared speech ready on her tongue. 3 executives sat at the far end of a mahogany table that could have seated 20, but it was the 4th person, the one rising from the head chair, that made her world stop spinning. Dark hair, kind eyes, the same easy smile that had undone her completely 2 weeks ago. "Ms. Benson," he said, his voice professionally neutral. "Welcome to Carter Global Events. I'm Damon Carter." Damon Carter, the billionaire CEO whose company she'd dreamed of working for, the man whose hotels and event venues graced magazine covers, the stranger who had made her forget her own name in a penthouse suite overlooking the Pacific. Their eyes met across the polished wood, and she saw her own shock reflected back at her, but his face revealed nothing to the others in the room. "Please sit," he continued smoothly. "We'd like to discuss your portfolio." Somehow, Talia made it through the interview. Somehow she answered questions about logistics and vendor relations and crisis management, while her heart hammered against her ribs. Somehow she maintained professional composure when every instinct screamed at her to run. "We'll be in touch," Damon said as she prepared to leave, his handshake brief and impersonal. But his eyes said everything his voice couldn't. "We need to talk." 3 days later, she got the job. And something else she hadn't expected. Standing in her tiny bathroom at 6 a.m., staring at 2 pink lines on a pregnancy test, Talia felt her world tilt sideways for the 2nd time in a month. "This can't be happening," she whispered to her reflection. But the nausea that had been plaguing her for days suddenly made perfect sense. The ultrasound appointment a week later delivered another shock. Twins. "Congratulations," the technician beamed, pointing to 2 tiny forms on the grainy screen. "Looks like you're about 8 weeks along. Do you want pictures?" Talia nodded numbly, clutching the printouts as she stumbled to her car. Damon Carter's children. The billionaire she'd be working for in 3 days was the father of her babies, and she had no idea how to tell him. Starting at Carter Global felt like entering a different universe. The resources were unlimited, the clients A-list, the pressure immense. Talia threw herself into work, hoping exhaustion would quiet the voice in her head that whispered, "Tell him," every time Damon walked past her office. But avoiding the CEO of the company proved impossible. "Excellent work on the Morrison wedding," he said one morning, appearing in her doorway like he'd materialized from thin air. The client was thrilled. "Thank you, Mr. Carter," she replied, without looking up from her computer screen. "Damon," he corrected. "We're not that formal here." The way he said his name made heat crawl up her neck. She risked a glance and found him watching her with an intensity that made her stomach flutter. "Is there something you need?" she asked. "Just checking on my newest team member." His voice was carefully neutral, but she caught the subtext. "You seem distant. Is everything all right?" "I'm carrying your children, and I don't know how to tell you without destroying both our careers." "Everything's fine," she lied. "Just focused on work." He lingered in her doorway for another moment, clearly wanting to say more. But Rebecca Mills chose that moment to appear, her perfectly styled blonde hair and designer suit marking her as one of the senior event coordinators. "Damon," Rebecca purred, sliding past him into Talia's office. "I have the Worthington anniversary details you requested." Talia watched the interaction with growing unease. Rebecca's smile was predatory, her body language territorial, and the way she looked at Talia suggested she'd already pegged her as competition. "I'll review them later," Damon said, his attention still fixed on Talia. "Ms. Benson, we should discuss your next assignment. My office, say 3 o'clock." After he left, Rebecca's mask slipped. Interesting, she mused, perching on the edge of Talia's desk. I've never seen Damon take such a personal interest in a new hire. You must have made quite an impression. The words were friendly, but the threat underneath was clear. Talia forced a professional smile. I just try to do good work. Oh, I'm sure you do. Rebecca's eyes glittered. I'm very good at reading people, Talia, and there's definitely something intriguing about you. As the weeks passed, the morning sickness intensified. Talia found herself rushing to the bathroom between meetings, making excuses about stomach bugs and food poisoning. Her clothes grew tighter, her energy plummeted, and Rebecca was watching everything. You know, she mentioned casually one afternoon, there's a lovely little clinic about 10 minutes from here, very discreet. They handle all sorts of women's health issues. The implication hit like a slap. Talia stared at her colleague, speechless. Just a suggestion, Rebecca continued sweetly, in case you ever need that kind of support. That evening, Talia sat in her car in the company parking garage, hands pressed to her still flat stomach. The babies were growing, becoming more real each day. She'd already started talking to them, sharing her fears and hopes in whispered conversations. But how could she tell Damon the truth? How could she prove she hadn't planned this, hadn't sought him out because of who he was? A knock on her window made her jump. Damon stood outside her car, concern etched across his features. She rolled down the window, praying her face didn't give anything away. Are you all right? He asked. You look pale. Just tired, she managed. Long day. Talia? The way he said her name, soft and questioning, almost broke her resolve. What happened that night? Do we need to talk about it? There's nothing to talk about, she said quickly. It was a mistake. We were both at a conference, both a little drunk, both... I wasn't drunk, he interrupted. And neither were you. What we shared was real. The air between them crackled with unspoken words. Talia felt tears threatening and blinked them back. It can't be real, she whispered. You're my boss. I need this job. I can't complicate things. Then why does it feel like you're hiding something from me? The question hung in the air like an accusation. Before she could answer, her phone buzzed with a text from her doctor's office, reminding her about her next ultrasound appointment. Damon's eyes flicked to the screen and his expression changed. I should go, Talia said, rolling up the window before he could respond. But as she drove away, she saw him standing in the rearview mirror, and she knew their conversation was far from over. The Metropolitan Museum Gala was supposed to be Talia's triumph. 3 months of planning, A-list guests, and a budget that could fund a small country. Everything had to be perfect, but at 4 months pregnant with twins, perfect was getting harder to maintain. The ice sculptures are melting, her assistant informed her as guests began arriving, and the string quartet is stuck in traffic. Talia pressed a hand to her lower back, where a constant ache had been building all day. Her black evening gown, carefully chosen to hide her growing bump, felt too tight, despite the careful tailoring. Get the backup musicians, she instructed, checking her list with shaking hands. And call the ice company. We need replacements in 30 minutes. The next 4 hours passed in a blur of crises and solutions. Talia coordinated everything from the shadows, ensuring the guests saw only seamless elegance while she battled exhaustion behind the scenes. Stunning event, Damon appeared beside her as dessert was being served. He looked impossibly handsome in his tuxedo, but his eyes were focused on her with unmistakable concern. But you look ready to collapse. I'm fine, she lied, gripping the wall for support. You're not fine. You haven't been fine for weeks. His voice was low, intense. Talia, what's going on? And don't tell me it's work stress. I know work stress. This is something else. Before she could answer, the room started spinning. The sounds of the gala faded to a dull roar, and the marble floor rushed up to meet her. The last thing she remembered was Damon's panicked voice calling her name. Talia woke to the antiseptic smell of a hospital room and the steady beep of monitoring equipment. Fluorescent lights made her squint as consciousness returned in stages. She's awake, someone said, and then Damon was there, his face etched with worry. What happened? She whispered, trying to sit up. You collapsed, he said, gently pressing her back down. "The doctor said you're dehydrated and exhausted, but—" He trailed off, his expression unreadable. "But what?" Fear crept into her voice. "Are the babies—" The words slipped out before she could stop them. Damon went completely still. "Babies," he repeated quietly. Dr. Wilson chose that moment to enter, clipboard in hand and a warm smile on her face. "Good, you're awake," she said cheerfully. "The twins are fine, but we need to talk about managing your stress levels. This kind of exhaustion isn't good for you or the babies." The silence that followed was deafening. Talia watched Damon's face cycle through shock, confusion, and something that might have been hope before settling into careful blankness. "How far along?" he asked, his voice barely audible. "About 4 months," Dr. Wilson answered, obviously missing the tension in the room. "She's carrying twins, so we'll want to monitor her closely over the next few weeks." After the doctor left, they stared at each other across an impossible chasm. "Are they mine?" Damon asked finally. Talia closed her eyes, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Yes." 4 months, he said, more to himself than to her. "You've known for 4 months, and you said nothing." "I didn't know how—" "How what?" His voice cracked with hurt and anger. "How to tell me I was going to be a father. How to give me the chance to be part of this." "You don't understand," she said desperately. "That night, I didn't know who you were. When I found out you were my boss, I thought you'd think I planned it, that I was some kind of gold digger who— So instead, you decided for both of us that I didn't deserve to know?" He stood abruptly, pacing to the window. "Do you have any idea what this feels like? Finding out I'm going to be a father from a doctor who assumes I already knew?" "Damon, please. I trusted you," he said, his back still to her. "That night meant something to me. You meant something. And all this time you've been carrying my children and treating me like a stranger. Because that's what we are." The words exploded out of her. "One night doesn't make us anything more than strangers who made a mistake." He turned then, and the pain in his eyes nearly destroyed her. "Is that really what you think? That our children are a mistake?" "No," she whispered. "They're the best thing that's ever happened to me. But us? This situation, it's impossible. Because I'm your boss? Because I have money? Or because you've already decided I'm not worth the risk?" She couldn't answer, because the truth was too complicated, too raw to put into words. "I need time to think," he said finally, "about all of this." He left without saying goodbye, and Talia was alone with the steady beep of machines and the echo of everything they'd left unsaid. The resignation letter was brief and professional. Talia submitted it the morning she was discharged from the hospital, along with a completed handover document for all her active projects. She didn't see Damon. His assistant accepted the papers with a polite smile and assured her that her final paycheck would be processed within the week. Word traveled fast in the events industry. Within days, whispers followed her everywhere. "Slept with the boss, got pregnant. Classic gold digger move. It's temporary," her friend Maya assured her over coffee. "People will forget. Find something else." But finding work proved impossible. Every interview ended the same way, a polite rejection and the sense that they'd already heard the rumors. Alone in her small apartment, Talia watched her savings dwindle and felt the babies growing stronger inside her. She talked to them constantly now, apologizing for the mess she'd made of their lives before they'd even begun. "Your father is a good man," she whispered, hands on her rounded belly. "I just don't know how to fix what I broke." The voicemail was an accident. Talia had been going through old phone logs, deleting numbers she no longer needed, when she accidentally pressed call instead of delete on Damon's contact. The phone connected before she could hang up, and in her flustered state, she forgot it was recording. "Hi, it's me," she said to the empty room, not realizing the call had gone to voicemail. "God, I'm such an idiot. I keep thinking about that night, about how perfect it was before everything got complicated. You made me feel alive again, like I was more than just someone who managed other people's dreams. I didn't even know your name, but I knew you were special. I knew that what we had was real, even if it was just for one night." She sank onto her couch, tears flowing freely. I never wanted your money. I didn't even know you had money. I wanted to feel like I mattered to someone. And now our babies are going to grow up thinking their father didn't want them, when the truth is I was too scared to give him the chance. She hung up, not realizing the message had been recorded and sent. 3 days later, there was a knock at her door. Damon stood in her hallway holding flowers and 2 small gift bags, looking as nervous as she'd ever seen him. "Can we talk?" he asked quietly. Talia's heart hammered as she let him in. Her apartment was tiny compared to what he was used to, but she'd made it warm with plants and books and the soft glow of fairy lights. "Your message," he said without preamble. "The voicemail you left. Did you mean it?" Heat flooded her cheeks. "You weren't supposed to hear that. I didn't realize—" "Did you mean it?" he repeated. She nodded, unable to speak. "I've been an ass," he said, setting the flowers on her small dining table. "When I found out about the babies, all I could think about was the last time someone claimed to be pregnant with my child. She wasn't, as it turned out. She wanted money for a termination that never happened. And when I found out, I swore I'd never let anyone use a child to manipulate me again." Talia sank onto her couch, one hand instinctively protective over her belly. "But you're not her," he continued, moving to sit across from her. "Your message made me realize something. You could have told me who you were that night. You could have mentioned Carter Global, name-dropped your way into my bed, but you didn't. You just talked about dreams and fears and what it felt like to build something from nothing." "I wanted you to like me for me," she whispered. "Not for what I could do for your company or what you could do for my career. I did like you. I more than liked you." He reached into one of the gift bags and pulled out a small teddy bear. "I've been carrying this around for a week, trying to work up the courage to come here." "Damon!" "I know I have no right to ask for another chance," he said. "I walked away when you needed me most. But if you'll let me, I want to be here. For you. For them. For whatever comes next." "It won't be easy," she said, tears spilling over. "People will always think I trapped you, that I'm only with you for your money. Let them think what they want. I know the truth." He moved to sit beside her, close enough to touch but still respecting her space. "That night at the hotel, you reminded me what it felt like to be just Damon, not the CEO or the billionaire or the guy with trust issues. You made me remember who I was before all the walls went up. And now? Now I want to tear down those walls, starting with you." He opened the second gift bag and pulled out a small velvet box. Talia's breath caught. "It's not what you think," he said quickly. "Well, it is, but not... I'm not proposing. Not yet. Not until you're ready." Inside the box was a simple gold key. "It's to my house in Malibu," he explained. "I want you to move in. Not because I'm trying to control you or take over your life, but because I want to wake up every morning knowing you and our babies are safe. I want to be there for the midnight cravings and the doctor's appointments and the first kicks. Damon, you don't have to decide now, but I need you to know that I'm all in. Whatever you need, whatever the babies need, I'm here." Talia looked at the key, then at his face, and saw something she'd never expected to find again. Hope. "One condition," she said finally. "Anything. Don't be here for me because you feel guilty or responsible. Be here because you want to be, because when these babies ask about their parents someday, I want to be able to tell them we chose each other. Every day," he promised, "for as long as you'll have me." 1 year later, the grand opening of Benson Events felt like a fairy tale. The boutique firm occupied the top floor of Carter Global's newest building, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city and a staff of 12 hand-selected event coordinators. "Ladies and gentlemen," Damon's voice carried across the crowded reception, "I'd like you to meet the woman who turned my world upside down and made me love every second of it. Talia Benson, founder and CEO of Benson Events." Applause filled the room as Talia stepped forward, radiant in a flowing emerald dress that complemented her glowing skin. In her arms, 6-month-old Elena slept peacefully, while her twin brother Marcus gurgled happily in his father's embrace. "Thank you all for being here," Talia said, her voice strong and confident. "A year ago, I thought my career was over. I was unemployed, pregnant, and convinced I'd burned every bridge in the industry." She looked at Damon, and the love in her eyes was unmistakable. But sometimes the best things come from the moments when we're brave enough to take a leap of faith. Benson Events exists because someone believed in my dreams, even when I'd stopped believing in them myself. Rebecca Mills, who had been watching from the back of the crowd, slipped quietly out the door. Her attempts to sabotage Talia had backfired spectacularly, and she'd been forced to find employment elsewhere. "To new beginnings," Damon proposed, raising his champagne glass with his free hand. "To second chances," Talia replied, touching her glass to his. As the celebration continued around them, they found a quiet corner where they could watch their children sleep and marvel at how far they'd come. "Any regrets?" Damon asked softly. "About which part?" "The one-night stand that changed everything. Getting pregnant with twins. Falling in love with my boss." "All of it." Talia considered this, watching Marcus's tiny fingers curl around Damon's thumb. "I regret the fear that kept us apart," she said finally. "I regret not trusting you with the truth sooner. But the rest of it? The night we met, these beautiful babies, building something together. I wouldn't change any of that, even though it was messy and complicated and nothing like the plan. Especially because it was messy and complicated," she laughed. "The best love stories always are." Outside the windows, the city sparkled with evening lights. Somewhere out there, other people were taking chances, making mistakes, and maybe finding their own unexpected fairy tales. And in a year or two, when the twins were old enough to understand, Talia and Damon would tell them the story of how a stormy night and a stranger in a hotel bar had led to the greatest adventure of their lives. But for now, surrounded by friends and family and the business they'd built together, they were content to hold their children close and know that sometimes the most beautiful stories begin with the words, "What if we're brave enough to try?" What did you think of Talia and Damon's incredible journey? Share this story if you believe in second chances and unexpected love. Want more emotional and dramatic stories with life-changing revelations? Let us know in the comments what kind of story you'd like to see next.